Can a queen ever escape the ghosts of her own sins? Or does the throne itself demand a price far greater than blood? This is the story of a woman who ruled with fire, prayed for redemption, and died in despair. The first crowned Queen of England, Mary Tudor, a ruler whose faith consumed her, whose love betrayed her, and whose final hours were darker than the night itself. Before we descend into the shadows of her last days, make sure you stay till the end, because what you're about to hear will change how you see power, faith, and the crown forever. And if you live for stories buried deep in history's silence, subscribe and step into the darkness with Pastify. The year is 1558. Winter has begun to choke London in fog and frost. The city's streets are silent, as if holding their breath. Inside the thick walls of St. James's Palace, a candle burns low beside the bed of a dying queen. Mary Tudor, daughter of Henry VIII, defender of the Catholic faith, and the most feared woman in England, is now a shadow of what she once was. Her skin pale as parchment, her eyes sunken and hollow, her breath slow, like time itself is running out. The room smells of sickness and incense. Her servants whisper prayers under their breath, terrified to meet her eyes. Because even now, at the edge of death, Mary's presence feels heavy, haunted by the cries of those she sent to the flames. They call her Bloody Mary. To her enemies, she's a tyrant, to her supporters, a saint. But in that dimly lit chamber, she's neither. She's just a woman, broken, betrayed, and drowning in her own regrets. Mary's story had begun with glory. Born to King Henry VIII and Queen Catherine of Aragon, she was once England's golden child. Brilliant, educated, and devout. Her father adored her, until the day he cast aside her mother for Anne Boleyn. That betrayal shattered Mary's world. Overnight, she was declared illegitimate, stripped of her royal title, and forced to serve as a maid to her baby sister Elizabeth, the daughter of the very woman who had destroyed her family. From that moment, Mary's faith became her weapon. She clung to it with all her heart, believing that through God she would one day reclaim her destiny. And when that day finally came, when she took the throne in 1553, she believed it was divine justice. She had waited her entire life for this: the crown, the power, the right to rule. But with it came a mission: to restore England to the true faith. At first, her people celebrated. Bells rang across London. The daughter of Catherine of Aragon had finally avenged her mother. But soon, joy turned to fear. Because Mary's faith, once pure, began to twist into obsession. She believed God demanded loyalty and punishment for the heretics who defied him. The fires began in Smithfield. One after another, men and women were tied to wooden stakes, their only crime, refusing to follow her church. Smoke blackened the sky. Children cried in the streets. The smell of burning flesh became England's unholy perfume. And every night, as she prayed before a golden crucifix, Mary whispered to herself that she was saving souls, not destroying them. But power and guilt are strange companions. And now, as she lay dying, those same fires haunted her sleep. The faces of the condemned returned in her fever dreams. She could hear them calling her name, asking if she still believed they deserved to burn. Her doctors called it dropsy. Some said cancer, others whispered of a curse. Her body was swollen, her face pale, her belly distended, as if carrying something that would never be born. Because Mary had suffered what history calls a phantom pregnancy. For months she had believed she carried the heir that England awaited, the child who would secure her faith and her legacy. Her belly grew, her cravings changed, and her joy returned. But when the time came, there was nothing. No child, no cry, only silence. That silence shattered her. The people mocked her behind closed doors. The courtiers whispered that God had abandoned her. Even her husband, Philip of Spain, whom she adored, left her behind, sailing away to pursue power elsewhere. Now, she was alone. No heir, no love, no loyalty, only faith, and the unbearable fear that her faith had betrayed her. By November, her body had begun to fail completely. She couldn't stand without trembling. Her lips cracked as she whispered prayers no one could understand. In the corridors, courtiers walked like ghosts, already preparing for her death. Everyone knew who would rise next: her half-sister Elizabeth, the same sister she had once humiliated, the same woman whose mother, Anne Boleyn, Mary had despised. And perhaps deep down, Mary knew it too. One evening, as rain beat against the windows, she called for her closest servant, Jane Dormer. Her voice was faint, like a whisper from another world. "The candle of England," she said slowly, "is burning low, and I fear it will go out in the wrong hands." Jane didn't answer. She only wept quietly beside the bed, because she knew those weren't the words of a queen. They were the last words of a woman watching her entire world fade into darkness. The next morning, Mary refused food. She turned her face toward the window where gray daylight fought through the clouds. Her eyes followed the light for a long while, as if searching for a sign, a reason, any last mercy. But there was none. Her hands shook as she clutched her rosary. The beads slipped through her fingers one by one, until the last fell onto the cold floor. And in that moment, she whispered a final prayer. Not for her kingdom, not for her throne, but for her soul. Outside her chamber, the guards exchanged uneasy glances. They had heard rumors of Elizabeth already preparing to take the crown, of foreign ambassadors waiting to send word that the Queen was dead. The throne of England was shifting, and everyone could feel it. That night, Mary dreamed again, of the fire, the screams, and the faces of those she'd condemned. But this time she wasn't standing over them. She was among them. And when she reached out for help, no one came. When she woke, her eyes were wet with tears. The room was silent, except for the sound of her failing breath. And somewhere deep in that silence, she finally understood. She had become the very thing she once feared most, a sinner who believed she was a saint. But fate wasn't done with her yet, because before the sun would rise again, Mary Tudor would face one last betrayal, one that would erase her name from glory forever. The dawn of November 1558 rose over London like a pale specter, gray and lifeless, as if even the sun mourned what was about to happen. Mary Tudor, once the iron-willed Queen of England, now lay in her chamber at St. James's Palace, swollen, jaundiced, and fading under the weight of her own failing body. The influenza epidemic had not spared her court, and the city beyond the palace walls was ravaged with death and despair. Yet no sickness outside compared to the sickness within her heart. For 5 years she had fought with fire and faith, burning 300 souls in her relentless drive to restore Catholic England, only to see it crumble as her strength left her. Her physicians, Dr. Thomas Huick and Dr. Owen, had watched her body betray her over and over, unable to offer relief beyond bloodletting, herbal mixtures, and prayers, each treatment weakening her further. The swelling in her abdomen, the jaundice, the cyclical fevers, and the phantom pregnancies that had tormented her for months were all signs that her body had begun the slow descent into oblivion, and Mary knew it. She had spent her life waiting for Philip II of Spain, her husband, the man she adored almost to the point of obsession. But he had abandoned her, retreating to Brussels for over a year, answering her desperate letters with silence, each unanswered line a dagger to her heart. And worse, she knew the truth about her court. Her most loyal servants and advisors were slipping away, abandoning her for the safe harbor of her half-sister Elizabeth. By November, the palace had become a ghost town. Courtiers whispered their farewells under the guise of errands and urgent duties, fleeing to Hatfield House, or pledging secret loyalty to the Protestant daughter who had waited 5 long years for this day. Mary, blind from her worsening illness, could not see who remained and who had betrayed her. Yet she felt it in every hushed tone, every hurried footstep. Even her closest confidant, Jane Dormer, could not hide the growing emptiness around her. And so Mary lay waiting, trembling, aware that her crown, the symbol of the justice she had spent a lifetime trying to enforce, was slipping from her grasp. November 9th had seen the Spanish ambassador Count de Feria arriving at St. James's to find a palace nearly empty, a queen clinging to life with only a handful of attendants by her side. Meanwhile, Elizabeth Tudor, poised and patient, waited quietly at Hatfield, reading beneath an oak tree, knowing precisely when the tide would turn. In these final days, Mary's mind flickered between clarity and delirium. She called out for long-dead relatives, her mother Catherine of Aragon, her governess Margaret Pole, even servants who had perished years before. And still, she whispered endlessly for Philip, unaware that he had already written her off. When Jane Dormer gently lied to her, saying Philip was on his way, Mary's fragile hope was rekindled, only to be crushed again by the inevitable truth her servants could not bear to speak. The palace, a place once filled with pomp and power, now smelled of sickness, herbs, and despair, the faint odor of candles mingling with the stench of decay. Every creak of the floorboards echoed Mary's growing dread, and each time the doors opened, she wondered if her replacement had arrived, if Elizabeth's shadow had already crossed the threshold. On November 10th, Dr. Huick conducted his final full examination. He noted complete blindness, liver enlargement, abdominal fluid accumulation, and cognitive decline, signs of a body ravaged by metastatic ovarian cancer and the long-standing complications of endometriosis, compounded by the pituitary tumor that had driven her phantom pregnancies. Every organ seemed to rebel against her. Her kidneys were failing, her heart faltering. Yet Mary remained conscious, trapped in her pain, aware of the betrayal, aware of the crown's inevitable passage. Even in her fevered state, she clutched her rosary, whispered her prayers, and imagined visions of children, angelic figures that offered a fleeting comfort in her suffering. By November 13th, only days from her death, Mary seemed to find moments of fragile serenity in these visions, a small mercy for a woman who had known little in life but loss. Yet the political world waited with cold calculation. Sir Nicholas Throckmorton, ever the opportunist, hovered outside her chamber, poised to claim the symbol of authority, the coronation ring, for Elizabeth. Even the dying Cardinal Reginald Pole, Mary's loyal advisor, felt the pull of mortality, succumbing hours after Mary's death, marking the simultaneous collapse of England's Catholic restoration. Mary's final hours were painstakingly slow. On the night of November 16th, Father John Feckenham anointed her with the extreme unction, anointing her eyes, ears, nose, lips, hands, and feet in the ritual meant to prepare the soul for the afterlife, each touch a wave of agony across her hypersensitive body. Candlelight flickered in the chamber, shadows dancing across the walls as Mary's labored breaths grew shallow. And then, in the stillness before dawn, between 4 and 5 a.m., she experienced a final, inexplicable moment of clarity. Blind for weeks, Mary focused on the elevated host during Mass, reciting the Agnus Dei clearly and strongly, her voice unwavering for the first time in months. Witnesses Jane Dormer and Father Feckenham recorded the miraculous moment. A queen ravaged by disease, conscious, and yet somehow seeing what no one else could. And then she simply stopped breathing. No fanfare, no struggle, no final words beyond that fleeting glimpse of divine peace. The coronation ring was taken from her warm hand almost immediately by Throckmorton, who rode to Hatfield at breakneck speed, carrying the symbol of Mary's authority to Elizabeth, ensuring that the crown and all the power it conferred passed without delay. Elizabeth, carefully staged under an oak tree, received the ring, falling to her knees and quoting Psalm 118 in Latin, performing her triumph with meticulous grace. Mary Tudor's body was prepared for embalming in accordance with Tudor custom, her organs removed and stored in separate containers, her chest cavity filled with spices and preservatives, her corpse wrapped in waxed surloth and placed in a lead coffin. Yet even in death, the political erasure began. Elizabeth's ascension meant that Mary's Catholic legacy would be obliterated. Priests would soon be forbidden to conduct masses in Latin. Altars would be torn down. Her reign, her devotion, her suffering, all reduced to a cautionary tale for history. Still, some witnesses preserved fragments of her story. Jane Dormer, Susan Clarence, and a few loyal attendants ensured that the details of Mary's suffering, her visions, her agony, her abandonment, survived the years hidden from the eyes of the world, waiting to be uncovered centuries later by historians who could finally see the truth beneath the legend. Mary Tudor, a queen who had wielded fire and faith, died not with grandeur or vengeance, but with the quiet, excruciating pain of a body betrayed by time, disease, and betrayal. In her final hours, she experienced both divine mercy and human abandonment, a duality that defined her life. The desire for power, love, and faith, always clashing with the stark realities of mortality, politics, and loneliness. By the time London woke to the news of her death, her half-sister Elizabeth had already begun to rewrite the story of England. Mary's reign, her ambitions, and her faith were transformed in the historical record into myth and caution, leaving only the faintest traces of the woman who had burned, suffered, and ruled. The city mourned and celebrated in uneasy harmony, while Mary's effigy, swollen belly preserved in wax, silently bore witness to her torment, a relic of a queen erased yet impossible to forget for those who knew the truth of her suffering. And as Elizabeth's reign began, Mary Tudor remained in shadows, her life a testament to the cost of faith, ambition, and betrayal, a haunting reminder that power cannot shield anyone from the inevitability of death, and that sometimes the cruelest betrayal comes not from enemies, but from the world itself. November 1558 passed like a silent wave over London, leaving death and opportunity in its wake. Mary Tudor, once feared as Bloody Mary for her relentless campaign to restore Catholicism, had been reduced to a corpse lying in state fragile, and embalmed her swollen abdomen and jaundiced skin, a testament to the suffering that had tormented her final months. Her effigy, created from death masks and careful measurement, stared sightlessly from her coffin as courtiers, nobles, and commoners filed past, their expressions a mixture of curiosity, fear, and awe. Meanwhile, Elizabeth Tudor, the Protestant half-sister who had waited patiently for this moment, was already consolidating her power, quietly but deliberately undoing every last effort Mary had made to revive Catholic England. Her orders were precise. Catholic altars dismantled, Latin masses forbidden, priests instructed to preach in English, heresy laws repealed, and Mary's former allies either dismissed or quietly integrated into Elizabeth's own circle, their loyalty bought with security and status. And yet, even as history began to erase Mary's legacy, fragments of her life persisted, hidden in letters, memoirs, and secret accounts preserved by loyal attendants like Jane Dormer and Susan Clarence, women who refused to let the world forget the truth of Mary's suffering, her unwavering faith, and the agonizing final months that had been endured with both courage and despair. Mary's funeral, held on December 13, 1558, was a spectacle of solemnity and silent contradiction. Westminster Abbey had been transformed into a sea of black, every surface draped in mourning cloth, hundreds of candles burning continuously, their smoke staining the ceiling and filling the air with an almost suffocating haze. Over 1,000 participants processed through the streets. 100 poor men in black carrying torches, heralds bearing the symbols of her sovereignty, coat of arms, helmet, sword, and shield, each item ceremonially broken and thrown into the grave, a symbolic gesture of her reign's finality. The coffin, draped in purple velvet and gold cloth, carried the eerily lifelike effigy, a crimson velvet representation of the Queen, eyes painted sightlessly toward the sky, a haunting reflection of the blindness and isolation that had defined her final days. Behind it walked Margaret Douglas, Countess of Lennox, one of the few mourners who genuinely grieved, while most others performed their duties with rigid formality, caught between fear, politics, and opportunism. Amid the procession, the city itself reacted unpredictably. Some cried silently, others cheered, and a few, emboldened by Elizabeth's looming authority, whispered curses and celebrated the end of the so-called tyrant. Yet every observer, whether in mourning or in secret jubilation, could not ignore the solemnity of Mary's suffering rendered tangible through her effigy, which bore the unmistakable signs of the agony she endured. Her body's betrayal preserved in wax and cloth for eternity. Elizabeth, ever the strategist, staged her triumph with meticulous care. When Sir Nicholas Throckmorton presented the coronation ring, she knelt beneath the oak tree at Hatfield, reciting Psalm 118 in Latin, performing a victory that was both personal and political. By securing the ring before any public announcement, Elizabeth symbolically claimed the crown while the kingdom was still shrouded in the quiet mourning of Mary's death, demonstrating that power was both inherited and seized with calculated precision. Yet even as Elizabeth ascended, the shadow of Mary's life lingered in subtle but undeniable ways. Courtiers who had abandoned Mary prospered under the new reign, their betrayals rewarded with positions of influence, reflecting a pattern that had haunted political life for centuries. Loyalty was fluid, survival was paramount, and history often celebrated the victors while the victims faded into obscurity. Mary's physicians, meanwhile, attempted to reconcile their observations with what had transpired, documenting the horrid combination of conditions that had led to her death: metastatic ovarian cancer, liver failure, a pituitary tumor driving phantom pregnancies, chronic endometriosis, and a body systematically destroyed by Tudor medical practices. Their Latin records, preserved in archives for centuries, would later allow modern historians and oncologists to reconstruct a horrifyingly precise picture of her final months, revealing a queen in constant agony, conscious of her decline, abandoned by husband and court alike, and forced to confront both her mortality and the imminent collapse of her religious mission. The cruelty of Mary's final months was compounded by the personal betrayals surrounding her. Susan Clarence, once a loyal lady-in-waiting, had left to curry favor with Elizabeth, spending years haunted by dreams of her mistress calling for her, asking why she had abandoned her. The political and personal treacheries interwoven with Mary's death created a tableau of despair, illustrating how ambition, survival, and faith collided in Tudor England. Even Philip II, the Spanish king and Mary's husband, remained detached, expressing only reasonable regret for her death in correspondence to his sister, demonstrating a cold calculation that mirrored the transactional nature of politics in Europe. Yet despite this erasure and abandonment, Mary's life, suffering, and death left indelible traces. Jane Dormer's memoirs, hidden and later discovered, captured intimate details of Mary's final days, from her angelic visions to her agonizing anointments and confessions, preserving the humanity of a queen often reduced to caricature. The funeral effigy with its swollen abdomen became a silent witness, a testament to the extreme pain and humiliation Mary endured, and an artifact through which future generations could glimpse the unvarnished truth of her life and death. As Elizabeth's reign stabilized, Mary's memory became both maligned and mythologized. Chroniclers labeled her Bloody Mary, painting her actions as fanaticism and her faith as delusion, transforming her desperate attempts to restore Catholicism into cautionary tales of tyranny and failure. Her genuine devotion, her intelligence, and her suffering were recast in stark, moralistic contrasts to Elizabeth's calm, calculating, and politically savvy reign. Yet those willing to look beyond the propagandistic lens discovered the complexity of a woman trapped by her body, by circumstance, and by a world that valued loyalty only when it served power. Even in death, the sisters' lives intertwined. Mary was interred in the vault beneath Westminster Abbey, only to be overshadowed literally and figuratively by Elizabeth decades later, when James I commissioned Elizabeth's magnificent monument atop her effigy, leaving Mary's name absent from the inscription. The small Latin acknowledgement added centuries later offered minimal restitution, yet it silently testified to the shared fate of two queens whose lives, ambitions, and deaths were forever entwined. The story of Mary Tudor reminds us that power, faith, and ambition cannot protect against mortality, betrayal, or the cruelty of history's erasers. Her final months, marked by unimaginable physical suffering and profound loneliness, exemplify how personal tragedy intersects with political upheaval, leaving a legacy both terrifying and instructive. And so the tale concludes not with grandiose triumph or epic last words, but with subtle horror and quiet dignity. A queen who burned her enemies suffered betrayal from those she trusted most, and died in darkness, ultimately preserved through wax paper and memory. If there is a lesson hidden in the agony of Mary Tudor, it is this: history remembers both the victors and the victims, but only those who are willing to look past the surface see the truth of their humanity, the depth of their suffering, and the consequences of ambition when intertwined with fragile mortality. So what do you think? Was Mary truly the villain history paints her to be, or simply a woman trapped by circumstance, by betrayal, and by her own body? If this story has fascinated you and left you questioning everything you thought you knew about history, make sure to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell, because in the next video, we'll uncover even more dark and hidden stories of power, betrayal, and ambition that history tried to erase. Don't miss it.